This week's episode is brought to you by Intact Insurance, the home and auto insurance brand Canadians trust most. Good afternoon, good morning, good evening, wherever you are. You're listening to the Jann Arden podcast. We have a great, amazing guest today that we cannot wait to talk to. This is going to be a 4-hour podcast because I'm here with Caitlin Green. I'm here with Sarah Burke. They're both in Toronto. Kate Bowler is our guest today. Bowler. Kate Bowler. Jesus Christ. You know, I just asked her. I said, Kate, how do you pronounce your name? She said Bowler. And then I said Bowler. Kate Bowler. We're not even going to edit this because this is real life. Kate Bowler is coming to us from North Carolina. I asked her before we came on air where she was living right now. She's like, Jann, I've always lived on a university campus. Listen, she's a fellow Canadian. She hails originally from Winnipeg, Manitoba. She has her own podcast. It's an award-winning podcast called Everything Happens. And doesn't it just effing just happen? She is an incredible author. I've got two conflicting reports, and this is really sad. One of them says she's a 3-time New York Times bestselling author. The other one says she's a 4 times best-selling author on the New York Times. We have that in common because I have 0 on the New York Times. Just she writes brilliant things that I'm going to let Caitlin actually lead this podcast off because she has such a personal connection with you, Kate, and you've done a lot to help her. She is also, on top of everything else, she's a professor. Why did I do mushrooms before the show? She's a professor at Duke University, went to Yale. And the only thing that I'm hopeful for is that she doesn't sing. Do you sing, Kate?
Oh, no, sorry. My mom's a professional singer, but I do know all the lyrics to Insensitive, though, if you need that.
We do need it. We're going to need an extra 4 minutes at the end of this. Listen, everybody, please welcome Kate Bowler to the Jann Arden podcast. Caitlin, you have such a personal connection to Kate.
I do.
And one of her books in particular. So I just want to let you lead off the bat because it's a great story. It's about grief and it's about the joy that you bring to people's lives, Kate. You bring a lot of it's common sense, but it's hopefulness, but it's not hope without action. And that's what I love about your books is that you give a lot of advice, but it comes with you need to take action. And I like that. You can't just expect things to change. You got to do something. Yeah. So Caitlin Green.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I found Kate after our son died, and I think I was looking for grief resources. And I heard the episode that you did on Terrible Thanks for Asking with Nora McInerney. And I loved it so much. And I was I was like a little sponge for people that I liked that had sort of been through something that was terrible and weren't there to say, everything happens for a reason. It was that everything happens, period, approach that you had that I really liked. And it felt positive, but without kind of the phoniness of it. So that's when I got No Cure for Being Human, and I just fell in love with it. And one of my really good friends who our friendship really deepened after our son died, because she was diagnosed with an inoperable form of esophageal cancer. And she's steady right now, but there's really no quote unquote cure for it. Yeah. She'll be living with it in some way for her whole life. And she has a young child, and her story had so many parallels to yours. And she lives in Australia, and I sent her all of your info, and she just became obsessed, ravenously got your books and listened to all your podcasts, and it's exactly the same as me. And I just felt like there are so many lessons to learn and so many valuable insights that you have on the most difficult parts of life that so many people avoid, that it really meant so much to me at that time because it was positive and it was real. And I feel like when someone's struggling, I frequently send them your way. I send them to your website. Like if they have a family member who's sick, if they've lost a loved one, whatever it is, I'm like, you should go to her website or listen to her podcast because it's very, very illuminating.
Caitlin.
So that's my fangirl intro.
Oh my gosh. And what a joy to be here. And thank you so much for telling me the really real. Because it's a terrible kind of fellowship when you really know somebody because the very worst thing took your life apart. And it does feel like such an incredible honor to be able to share language. And because then you get a chance to be part of somebody's kind of like the most tender thing, which is the way we make meaning of what happens to us. So honestly, Caitlin, I think that is the most ridiculously beautiful way to be your friend. And I'm so grateful to like meet you. And I'm like such a stupid fan of this podcast. So I've been like so lightly sweaty and excited to be on with you guys today. Just brought a bomber's hat just in case we need that. It's the vintage one. It's the throwback. Looks a lot like the Huskies one, which is confusing for everybody. But
very nice.
Just ready to be peak Canadian with you guys, being real people.
I love that.
Well, we try and be real. We're so real. We're in trouble at least like 3 times a week with someone yelling at us that we haven't represented an opinion properly, which is good because it's all about making people think, and at least we know that they're listening.
Yeah.
You might find this interesting, Kate, is last week we touched on the medically assistance in dying. And I can certainly kill 2 birds with 1 stone here. Not that I kill birds, folks. Don't write me letters.
Don't write that anywhere on the internet.
Just we can hit 2 cans off the fence. So we got a lot of, and help me out here, so many people that are in a marginalized, disabled situation in their lives, be it mental health, be it a physical disability. I mean, it runs the gamut. And they really came at us very loudly to tell us that, hey, listen to us. MAID is not everything that it seems to be, because for people who have no options, that are struggling with grief, struggling with depression, struggling with anxiety, that is their only option to survive in this world, is to try and get MAID, and then they don't actually they're not able to get it for whatever reasons, and I just wanted to ask you what you thought of that. I didn't even think about people wanting assistance in that because they literally can't do their laundry, or they can't leave their house, or they can't afford to pay for their, like, it really
perspective.
Yes, it really shocked me. It really set me back, because I think I came at it from a place of privilege, and I feel very bad about it.
Oh. Well, it's hard when we're trying to think about life as a set of choices. And sometimes like the euthanasia debate gets presented to us as just part of that framework, is like, well, help me make choices then about how we live and how we die. And I'm part of the, supervision of the MAID processes. They do outtake interviews with people. And there's a really stunning article that was written, I think, by Plow, that took transcript, took parts of the transcripts of those interviews that people did when they had applied and then received permission for MAID. And those, I have to admit, I was too sad for a whole weekend after reading that article, because it was quotes like, well, it's not that I want to die, it's just that I can't afford to live.
Yes, this was the narrative that we were hearing over and over in the last few days from our podcast on Friday. And I have to tell you, I'm very shaken, because I didn't know. I didn't know.
Well, I mean, I think what's so lovely and important about everyone being willing to engage in how we think about being sick and terrified is our greatest fears is losing control. And one of our greatest fears is then becoming a burden to others. And depending on where we are in our set of abilities. I remember one of my biggest fears when I got sick was I did the math and realized almost immediately that I was going to bankrupt everybody that I loved. And that like hit me in a very difficult, I started, my shame button is too big. And I really started to think, no, I am the bad thing. I'm the thing that happens to people. And it's a lie, of course. We're all kinds of things. And we are at our very core, like we are, because we are precious. We are actually a gift. But sometimes when we're sick, when we get scared, we can get overwhelmed by feeling like every bad thing that happens is part of our responsibility to make everything easier on others. So I think that's part of what the difficulty around how we think about being weak and fragile is it's like a hard, but it's such a beautiful conversation because we're all trying to figure out a way to feel our own belovedness, you know, in the best and in the worst.
Yeah. I think, you know, you said something just now. I am what happens to people. It's like a Taylor Swift song. Hey, you know,
Yeah.
hi, it's me. I'm the problem. It's me.
Yeah.
I think a lot of us can feel like that sometime, that
Yeah.
we have leaned on our family too much, or we always feel like we're in a state of flux and in a state of chaos. And you even feel bad about bringing up a conversation with you've had somebody at work, or an argument that you've had with someone at the office. Caitlin just came from, you know, a really tricky situation where she worked for 13 years. And I think I felt like she was like, I don't want to burden you guys with the details, and that she was kind of keeping it to herself. I don't know how much of that's true, Caitlin, but I did feel like that.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, spoiler alert, I was laid off. So,
Oh,
and it's not, it's the desire to make everyone else comfortable in conversation. And to sort of like gloss over the difficult things. But then when you go through something, like I didn't have as much of a hard time, I think, because of having my previous experience with loss. So I do think that I learned that, you know, going through something difficult can kind of be this superpower, because as you articulated, Kate, it is a shorthand with other people who've been through something. And so you,
Community.
yeah, it is, exactly.
Yeah.
And a term I heard was post-traumatic growth
Yeah.
instead of post-traumatic
I like
stress.
that.
And I feel like it's a nice reframing of going through difficult times, because we're all going to go through difficult times. So I don't, yeah, maybe I was glossing over it. I think you do it without even realizing it. You minimize stuff that's happening in your life without even realizing you're doing it. Maybe to make yourself feel better, but definitely to make other people more comfortable.
Yeah.
And because you don't want them to have a bad conversation or a bad time, or you don't
Yeah.
want to feel, and you also don't want to feel like you're complaining, because I know that I am fortunate in other ways, but yeah, you're still handling a difficult situation.
There's a couple ways you can usually tell if you're doing it too, because I find that, I mean, I've got a pretty like low flat affect, which I do for the sake of also being able to be slightly more honest. But I can always tell when I'm like telling a truth, and then I'm starting to notice that it's going really high, and then I can't tell how to let the thought and we're out. Like,
Yeah.
and I can just tell that sadness is like I launched a plane and I'm worried that there's not a runway, especially if you see the look on their face and you're like, oh, I broke a rule and now
step
I
on,
cannot.
kind of?
Yeah. You just
Yeah.
want to like soften it the second you said it. But the truth is, you usually said it because, frankly, it needed to be said. You just realized there wasn't a landing pad.
How are you at asking for help, Kate?
Oh my gosh. Yeah. I mean,
That's terrible
I'm-
for me. That's
it's-
my,
yeah.
I will sit alone for 3 days. I'm getting better. I mean, 62 years old. I'm finally, my mother's Alzheimer's. I always say good things come out of bad things. My mother's Alzheimer's actually shifted my ability to reach out to my friends and ask for help. And people always said that to me. You never need anything. Like, are you okay out there? And I'm like, I'm not really okay. So how are you good
Yeah.
at it?
Oh yeah. I'm terrible. I'm a huge
Okay.
liar. Yeah. Especially like, how are you? Fine. I'm wondering like when, Jann, can you remember the time in which like was it a breaking moment, or was it you just realized you were the only one that was
I
going to
was
have to break
scared.
the momentum? Aw.
I was very scared. And I think everyone assumes that memory loss is never going to affect them. My parents seemed like these steadfast,
Yeah.
steady on people. And they both kind of got sick at the same time. But when people are together, you don't notice it as much. And when my father died, cat was out of the bag. The cat with no memory. Imagine having a cat running around that has no idea what it's doing, what it's looking for. Was I hungry? You know, you could feed my mom and she'd say, I'm hungry. And I'm like, oh my God. But I'd always feed her again because she was only like 106 pounds. But I was scared, Kate. Long-winded answer. And I felt like I was making myself sick.
Oh, yeah. Yeah. I think I could hide mine for such a long time because I used to travel by myself for medical appointments, and then I just really got used to doing medical appointments alone because I would spend so much time worrying about how other people received it, or frankly, if they say the wrong thing, it's kind of better to be in a room by yourself. And so I just found that my coping strategies were making me like lonelier, sadder, more convinced that I was the only person in pain, which is a lie, but it feels true when you're the one going through something.
Is traveling for medical what brought you down to the States?
No, I had spent about 2 years. The my journey into America was just the never-ending school program. Was like, will you have me? Great, I'll be right there. And just put stuff in my 1993 Previa and head on out. So the only places I lived in the States are basically just universities, where I'm like, or what are we doing? Do I have a sweatshirt? Great, great, great.
What a fantastic place to live, though. I mean, one of my biggest regrets is always going to be not getting a secondary education. And I'm better about it now, but I do have moments where I feel that my lack of academic prowess is a disability in a sense. But I've just learned things that I want to know now, Kate. I go and get a book, I look it
Yeah.
up. When I'm interested in something, I learn about it. The girls know that about me with history or things like that.
Yeah.
I know more about Henry VIII than I should know. And now I have a metal detector, so look out.
That's so wild for me to hear you say you feel in any way insecure, because one of your unbelievable gifts is like your precision of language.
Mhm.
You
sure.
can land a phrase like nobody else. So, and I just think that's so much of what like raw intelligence is it's like
Well,
it's the perfect word.
Well, thank you for giving me this intro into your latest book, because you are also a gifted writer. I mean, when I think about Caitlin's experience and how the words that you put down on a page and the words that you said on a podcast shifted the most horrible, terrifying, terrible moment in Caitlin and her husband's life and in her family's life. I mean, so kudos to you for being able to use your own sadness, your own failings, that's where empathy comes from. You have
Yeah.
to know what that feels like in order to share it with other people. But tell me about Have a Beautiful, Terrible Day, daily meditations for ups and downs and the in-betweens. And what prompted you to sit at a keyboard and start this book?
I'm just a one woman mission to ruin small talk mostly. And I just couldn't think of, I always just want more and more language to not sort of immediately step into that like performed cheerfulness that's really expected of women and in particular. And last year I was going through this. I just got stuck in a pain loop because of chronic pain I'd gotten from too many kind of cancer related surgeries. And so long after I wasn't battling cancer, I just found that I had so much chronic pain and I was so overwhelmed because I thought like, well, haven't I survived this already? Like, can't I be in the magical, where is mountaintop yoga available to me personally?
With goats.
So, exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. You give me that smoothie bar, you give me a cat poster and I want to be on it. And I felt that same like loop of despair that like my days were getting too short because I couldn't manage my pain. It was probably going to be a terrible day. So I remembered something I'd really learned when I was having to live in between like treatments that really only guaranteed me 2 or 3 more months of life at a time. And I thought,
Jesus.
actually it's a lot easier if you narrow your horizon a bit and then you just ask yourself like, well, if it can't even be a fantastic day, could it just be a beautiful, terrible day? And how to so I only had about an hour of brain space in a day because I was just not well enough. So within an hour, I would write these reflections on how to try to live inside the days I have.
Well, you call it bite-sized reflections. And I think that's pretty much all the world can do.
Yeah. Yeah, truly.
These
Yes.
these morning salutations or a 10-minute yoga or a 3-minute meditation. I've got so many apps on my phone, Kate,
Yeah.
that are 2 minutes, 90 seconds, a 6-minute reflection. Like if I look at my phone, I'm like, 6 minutes? That's
Yeah, I mean,
pushing it.
girl, yeah, exactly. Yeah, exactly.
What do you think I do? Do you think I don't work? Like 6 minutes.
That makes so much sense to me. And it's also too, because the more anxiety or grief or just busyness short circuits our thinking, the more we need these little interruptions to our normal patterns. And I think our normal patterns are like, I just think of them as a historian, like what are the cultural scripts we get? Like what are the inherited? And one of the cultural scripts we get is that everything always has to be magically teaching us a lesson. And you're supposed to be learning that lesson or else you're failing today. Sorry, loser. And I'm like, oh, okay. Like I can't be losing every day.
Well, Sarah, you brought this up and in one of the notes that you'd sent me this week, and you're just like, I want you to pursue this question with Kate, because it was about how do you not shove mindfulness down somebody's throat. So I want you to expand on that a little bit, because when I read it from you, I was really interested in how people would perceive positivity, which seems so bizarre.
Yeah. Don't you feel like that mindfulness word is thrown around a lot in the conversation surrounding the work that you do?
Totally. And mindfulness, I think, has become another shorthand for a kind of performance of emotional mastery. And then now we're back into the framework we really all need to get out of, which is control and
letting go.
Yeah. And like everybody then becomes, I think the problem is we started this kind of, we all use therapeutic language all the time. We mostly talk about how we feel. If someone says, how are you? We say, I feel. Before the 1970s, we would have answered with usually like mental language, like, I believe that, or I'm arguing that. But since the 1970s, we've become so emotional in our language. And part of the consequence is that we think of our emotions as constantly being so important that if we're not demonstrating this like super Zen-like calm at all times, then we are at our core either defective, too anxious. And we've started to really demonize like having a wide range of human emotion. So it's kind of one of the more interesting sort of trends as a historian, is watching the way that now this turn toward the therapeutic is a little bit eating us alive.
And even with the idea of like therapeutic language, like it's still important and it's still useful.
Yeah.
But your emotions are not more important than someone else's is sometimes hard to understand.
Mm-hmm.
And that they can exist at the same time as someone else's.
No. And actually, I mean, one of the reasons is because we have, and this is one of my great pet peeves, is like, I'm a religious historian. So I think what people are missing when they use therapeutic language is they're actually attaching religious language to therapeutic language. So that's why we talk about vibes all the time. Vibes are a religious ideology. It's the idea that we have vibrations that, and like we're in we have that have like layers, and then the positive emotions are higher. And
millennials really screwed that up.
Oh my gosh. And the problem then is that we assume then that there's good emotions and bad emotions. And the problem is like people who would never think that they're kind of forcing their religion on other people are going to be the first ones they're screaming good vibes only at you. And I find it pretty oppressive for all of us who need to be able to say, actually, today's a really difficult day because I'm living in reality. And if you don't let me live in reality, it actually has, it's compressing who we think that we have to be in the world in a really negative way.
I also feel like it seems as though the goal for many people is to create eternal happiness as this baseline, which is insane because no one is happy all the time. Happiness is not a baseline emotion. And so if you get over that successfully, it does feel like a relief. The relief of knowing that you feel sad and then you feel happy, or you feel angry and you can feel happy again. And you're just toggling through these different things. And I found that was this goal that I had that then was taken apart when I was so grief stricken, is that I was like, yeah, you're not going to feel happy for a while. And so many friends would, my friends who then apologized, because there's a lot of people get worried about how they're responding to you in those moments. And so they say, oh, I didn't reach out, or I feel like I didn't reach out enough. But sometimes I wanted to talk to you about it, but I didn't want to bring it up because I thought you were having maybe a really good day. And I was like, guys, I was never having a good day. So nothing you said could have ruined it. And that's fine. It's fine to just be honest and say, like, I wasn't having a great day. Like, hearing from you and talking about it would have been just fine. And we can all be okay with me feeling like complete crap right now. And that's sort of where a lot of your work was really helpful, because it reinforced the idea that yeah, I'm not doing okay. And that was like Nora McInerney's podcast that I discovered you on was like, terrible. Thanks for asking. Like, that's how I'm doing. And I think it really normalized so much of that. And it's endlessly helpful. And when you find a good therapist that you click with, which I did, when I would talk to her about that, she used you in like recommendation to a lot of her patients as well for just that reason. Cause it was like this notion that we're all supposed to be happy in the midst of difficult times, even if it's not happening to you personally, even if you're just reading the news, you're not going to be happy every single day, all day. It's not realistic.
Is there not a parallel here? And I say this because I think all three of you have like specific and relatable recent grief that I maybe haven't experienced. But like a parallel here might be like, okay, so what? Jann is sober. She still wants to be invited to go out and participate in having a drink with her friends. She'll order whatever she wants.
I don't know. I'm quite happy here.
But isn't it interesting that humans avoid like just what they don't know and understand? It's easier for someone on the other, like, you know, a friend in the circle to be like, I'm not going to ask her about that today because I don't want to ruin her day. But it's all based on assumption.
And I think people don't want to take it on, Sarah.
Yeah.
Like, I really feel like we're living in such fast times. And, you know, maybe it was fast times in the 60s. Maybe it was fast times in the 20s. I don't know. All we know is that we're here now, and this is what we're experiencing. You know, we're waiting for another world war to, you know, spring upon us in the Middle East. And it's a precarious time. But we are so not equipped. And I'll be really honest. Sometimes I don't want to take on other people's stuff. I feel like I'm barely just on the sanity train, and I'm coping, and I'm sleeping okay, and I selfishly think I can't do it. I just can't do it. I still will step up into myself and kind of get my shit together, but I still find it hard to sometimes. I'm not going to ask that question because I don't want to fucking know. And how terrible is that? And then you sit in that, Kate.
Yeah. I like that. I really appreciate that honesty, because sometimes we can feel this. We do just get these grief hangovers being a person in the world right now. I mean, the way that we consume media now, because the way it's packaged to us and for us, we do know too much. And we know it in doses that we are unable to, like, our poor, sweet little parasympathetic nervous systems like cannot handle. And then when it comes to just the people we want to be to the people in our lives, I think the scale of our lives is too big. I mean, we go on social media, and I think that's the first feeling we have is, this is too many people. I cannot care equally about this number of people. My heart will implode. I'm positive I'll die of empathy-related deaths. You know?
Well, we forget how big our circles are, like how big the acquaintance circles are, and but my inner circle is very manageable, and it's very small, and it's getting smaller, which is very much by design. I have a handful of friends, and I know a lot of people, and there's certainly people that I enjoy seeing, but when I really think about what I need to make my life work in a manageable, healthy way, it's just where I'm at. And it's people that have known me, you know, quite a long time. I've got really old friends, and I've got new friends too, although I find it harder to make friends as you get older. You know, the kinds that will be there for you and that you can share grief stories with, and you can share, you know, trauma stories with, that you don't feel like, is it too much information? I think I want you to speak to that, is, you know, people that really give you too much information, people that you've maybe known for 2 months, and all of a sudden you are handed a basket full of snakes, and you always feel bad because you can't accept it. I don't want that basket full of snakes.
Yeah. That is, and sometimes certain people and their giant open moon faces, they get too many of those baskets. I mean, like, sometimes you're the people that people want to tell. And Jann, especially because you've got like the fun, ironic tone, I bet you people's assumption is like, oh, I can say anything. And in our hearts, we're like, oh, no, but I can't hear I can hear everything. It's 1,000 times too much information. I'm just thinking of a conversation I had on Friday with a new person that I thought was going to be a very manageable conversation. And then I realized that because of their assumptions about who I am, that's like, because that's not real intimacy. You know, that's just like two holograms meeting. And then the assumption then that I can carry the whole weight of a whole life. And I think we sometimes do that to each other where we don't kind of take the longer road, because at this point in our lives, all of us have befores and afters and kind of stories that take some time to unpack. So I think intimacy takes a lot more time than
how do we
think
tell
it
those
does.
people? Okay, in practical terms, so you're standing there, someone's handing you a basket that's on fire with 18 sticks of dynamite.
Yeah.
What is your advice to those of us? Like, I don't want to hurt anybody's feelings.
Yeah.
I don't like contention. I don't like any problems. I'm a peacemaker for the most part.
Yeah.
What do we do? How do you explain to that person that you don't know that well, that you can't accept it?
Yeah.
I don't even know where to start.
Well, and there's a certain version of that too, where they almost say it so casually. Like, it's not like they're giving you a gift, like their most precious thing. They're giving you everything that I just find that people do that oftentimes for small talk, is they are just describing every bad thing of every person they're aware of. And then they just give it to you. The casualness, honestly, I find really painful, because I'm like, no. Like, when I hear something, like, I'm really going to care, and I can't hear all of it. So sometimes I just like put my hands up and I'm like, oh my gosh, that's you're right. That's so much to hear. Or just try to offer something kind of like body languagey on like, whoa, that is so hard. But like, stop hands for sure. Because in so many settings in my life, I really don't mind hearing it. I have a glitchy, wonderful glitch where I can hear most things and it doesn't hurt me, because the people that come talk to me, they frankly, like, they're trying to give me their special, like, I don't know how to describe this. I remember when I was getting chemotherapy, you know, you sit in that stupid chair for like 8 hours, and my nurse came by one time and she sat down and she just touched my arm in the lightest way. And she said, I'm sorry, I just wasn't sure how to tell you, but I lost a son. And she said it in the lightest way, but I knew that she was just trying to give me the gift of our common love. Like, don't worry, you're not over there. I'm not over here. I'm just like you. And so when you can tell someone's giving you a present and when they're trying to like dump something on you, and it's the gift that you want to hear and it's the dumping that's too much.
The other part of this, Kate, is when people are stealing from you. So when they want advice and you're thinking, okay, I'm offering you my earnest opinion here, but you just see your words, all the letters just floating over their heads.
Yes.
And they're just, you see them coming, the D's and the F's and the E's are coming out their ears. And you're like, no, you got to put that in your brain. Like, plug your ears. All the words are coming out. That drives me bonkers too, is the ability that we all have to be stolen from, that we don't know how to say, well, I really don't know. I don't think I have the experience to tell you. Like, I'll usually give an opinion, but my first words out of my mouth are, you already know what the answer is. Mm-hmm. I use that a lot. And I feel like people do know. Yeah. They do know what the decision is, but they need a second opinion, which I understand. I hope I'm not sounding callous, but
no, that makes sense.
I don't like being stolen from either. Yeah. I don't like people, using up my time in a way that's not beneficial to either party.
Yeah. There's one other category like that I've only met a few of, but I realized that there was a perfect and horrible word for them. And it's when people
I can't wait for this.
want to find out information, but it's extractive. Like, it's not trying to make me feel better. It's not so that they can go off and magically make me a casserole and come back. Like, they want something and it feels kind of delicious. And those people just feed off of the pain of other people. They just like knowing, but it's not to love you. And those people are ghouls.
Yeah. Ghouls. Or I call them grief thieves, actually, sometimes.
Do you really, Caitlin?
Yeah.
That's a really good, where they like want to know.
Kind of, yeah. And then they'll quickly, pivot it to be about them. And so, that's kind of like a common thing that happens. And it's funny because there is no etiquette handbook I find on like grief, although it is something that's kind of coming for us all. Even if you're not losing, like a loved one necessarily in this moment, you've had a disappointment that would present as grief. And I think I do feel as though your writings and a lot of the stuff that you put out into the world helps people navigate a little bit of that. But it's also hard because no one's looking for it until they need it.
Yeah,
so it's weird.
So
It should be like a high school class where people are like, hey, we're going to help you navigate how to talk to people who are really struggling, and things that are helpful to them and things that are not helpful to them. Like, don't say everything happens for a reason, and don't try to assign meaning to like someone necessarily like losing a parent or a child, because maybe there isn't any meaning there. And it's just something that happened. And I think that's that has been helpful for me, at least, because otherwise you can get stuck with the grief thieves everywhere, or the ghouls.
That is such a good phrase.
Let's get t-shirts.
We should. We're working on merch. That could be one of them. Do you find that your background in like your religious studies background, do you think that it helped equip you sort of for looking at your struggles, your diagnosis, and then the struggles of others? Do you think that that helps you? Because it's funny, when I would talk about you to other people or recommend you, I'd say that, she has a background. She's a professor of divinity. She has a religious background. And you did a lot of work in, what was it? Like it's a prosperity, like what, how would you describe that?
Yeah. Prosperity gospel. The God wants to give you health, wealth, and money, people. Yeah.
Yeah. So like you do good stuff, then good stuff happens to you. You do good stuff happens to you. And when that gets fractured and people don't know what to happen, or is this bad thing happening to me because I'm bad in some way, it's this like magical thinking. Like, do you feel like your studies and your background made you look at things in a different way? And like, how did that feel for you being a religious person? How do you marry all that?
Yeah. And like, I probably shouldn't have been surprised that the people, because I teach in a divinity school, which is a lot of people are just doing academic work, but a lot of people are thinking about how it's going to fit into the lives and communities of people around them. And I probably shouldn't have been surprised that the people who are most trained to deal with grief and difficulty are therapists and chaplains. I mean, they go to school for that. They're like, they work in hospitals all day long. They're actually like, and I should have known that because they were really lovely with me. They were the flagrant violators of hospital visiting privileges who just like pop their little clerical collars on and like come on over while I'm wearing some like hideous gown. I'm like, stop looking at me. And they would like, the things they would do. They would like just I would wake up sometimes from surgeries wearing socks I obviously didn't put on. And I was like, you love me. Yeah. It's embarrassing the way you love me. But I think part of what, I mean, it's a weird specialty. I spent almost all my 20s interviewing televangelists, and I got to know the prosperity gospel because of a giant Winnipeg church that blew my mind. No and way. I ran around telling everybody, I was like, absolutely not. This is for Americans. But it turns out it was Canada's largest church, run by a man who refused to let anybody grieve or be poor or be a person in any fundamental way. And I was so outraged by it in a way that you kind of look at something you just have absolutely like contempt and no connection to. And that's what got me started on this, like, oh my gosh, someone needs to write a history of places like this where God has to reward everyone with every good thing. But it took me a long time till I realized that we all often have a set of expectations and of how life is going to go. And in that desperation, we need some tenderness for ourselves of the lives we wished that we would have, and just how heartbroken we are, when they don't always turn out the way we wish.
And most of us have such a fractured idea of God to begin with, because our parents were no more equipped to teach us any kind of religious studies as the people that were running the churches. I know that, when I was a teenager, and it dawned on me that everything that I seemed to be doing and everything that I believed in was based on punishment and reward. That this system, this very simple system of if you do good things, you'll be rewarded. And if you do bad things, you're going to be punished. And that idea goes back in antiquity. It goes back thousands of years of how people controlled people. I mean, taxes were paid so that you went to heaven. Taxes were paid so that you couldn't go into a church, God forbid, and everything was in Latin. So people didn't even have access to these sacred books that they could only dream about. I mean, imagine not being able to be buried inside of a churchyard if you were a certain kind of person. You had to be thrown in a ditch, 2 miles away in unconsecrated ground. Like, all that stuff sunk so deeply into me that it really shook my idea about, is there a God? And I guess my long-winded question is, do you believe in God? What is God to you?
Yeah, because when we know those fractured views, like, they do go so deep, and sometimes we don't realize we have been really hurt by something until we feel some kind of like deep unworthiness. It's something we really do deserve, And I think that was what, okay, so, this is all very embarrassing because, like, as a historian, I'm like very good at being like, look, it was 1425. And I'm very good at describing things in the past, and I'm really good at ruining historical movies you like. But when it comes to like describing my own spiritual experiences, I like never talked about it. I just get very like,
you don't have to talk about
no,
it. No,
I will, Jann, I will. But like, it wasn't until I was very sick and I was so angry, and I felt really hurt, mostly by the wild, both Christian things people were saying at me, but also the wellness community is just lethal with, it was something I ate, it was something I've done, have I not manifested that? This is all just different versions of the prosperity gospel. Or like, God had a plan.
Oh,
I didn't
Jesus.
realize, God
No
didn't
pun intended.
realize. Yeah, it was the amount of dying in a culture that seems to have an explanation.
They have a fucking catchphrase for everything.
Yeah. They do. They have a catchphrase for my death.
God doesn't give you anything that you can't handle. God doesn't give you anything that it's all a fucking catchphrase.
Yeah, that's right.
And I don't want to offend anybody out there. Your God is your God, and my God is whatever it is. But it does. It comes down to, and I would imagine the wellness community and its variations on the theme.
Yeah.
Of things that people have been taught to say. And this goes back earlier in our conversation of grief thieves, how people are equipped to deal with hard things that are going on, especially when someone is sick, especially when someone has a critical, perhaps terminal disease right in front of them. It comes down to these fucking simple, Hallmark card sayings. And it's not helpful to anybody.
No, it isn't. It isn't. It's crushing. Because it's not a life, it's yours. It's not a son, it's your kid. No one can know, and I know when you're being lied to. I mean, I believe in heaven, and yet nothing in heaven was going to be the promise to me of anything but that I would miss it all. I would miss it all. And so I was just like, do not fucking lie to me.
And your friend last week, you were saying, was pointing at the floor?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, the 92-year-old, my friend's mother-in-law, who was doing the assisted death program, she pointed at the floor and she said, I hope I don't end up down there. And I said, well, if you do, say hi to my dad. And, we had a good laugh. I think I was proud of myself the way I went into the room. It's hard, but I'm not the family. I'm not the son. I'm not the daughter-in-law. And I just said, you guys are going on an adventure.
Yeah.
And I just did my thing. I helped my friends pick up their dogs and get them out of there. But I left, they were joyful about it. Anyway, I was curious about, if you believed in a personal God and someone sitting there doling out, you're good, you're not. Yes, we'll let this Holocaust go on. No, the war is fine. Like, I'm telling you, just with how this plays out, it's just not something my brain will accept anymore.
Yeah.
Maybe when I was scared to not believe, scared that something terrible was going to happen to me, but not anymore.
Yeah.
I'm just like, I'll take my chances.
Yeah.
Because I don't believe in this.
Yeah. Yeah, I really hear you. Because the feeling where you're in a deserve matrix, where you have to deserve something like love, you have to deserve something like punishment,
and that's part of the language too, right?
I think it falls away. I think I hope just part of living with life as it is, I hope that stuff falls away for everybody, because when it did for me, and I was such a little striver, I loved like a medals wall but like in the hospital, when I was at my most heartbroken and most angry that it was happening to me, I did feel such an overwhelming, incomprehensible amount of supernatural love, like
Good.
love from God, love from other people, so much love that I felt like I should have been more angry, and I wanted to be more angry. And that feeling of very intense love like really carried me through the worst, like the worst of the surgery aftermath, the worst of how devastated I was. And I've kind of come back to that every now and then as being, I'm so surprised, but I'm so relieved, because it really was at the moment when all of my ideas of what I thought religion was going to get me really had failed me. Because I was like, wasn't I pretty good? Like, wasn't I like kind of not a bad Christian?
Exactly.
Like, I know you're not supposed to say that, but like, I was pretty, like, divinity school professor. Like, if someone's going to earn their way into something better, like, it's going to be me. And then it was not. So
Yeah, it feels like the like kind of like maybe the reward is that like being open to that feeling of love and like having that community. And I do really also feel like community seems so missing, and that's a piece that happens, and it touches on so much we've covered in the podcast so far. But with Made, when we talk about the part of it that's sad, because it's some people who don't feel cared for, so they are looking at other options for themselves. Made might be one of them. The feeling of not wanting to burden other people with your own stuff. What's really missing is community. Increasingly, I think everyone's leading a more isolated life emotionally, and the church was a bigger part of people's life previously. And as that has sort of fallen away through, various awful things that various churches have done, maybe perhaps contributing to that, but that role and that important center point that it was for so many people in their life, and creating that sense of community and belonging, the good stuff that you took with a lot of religion, with that being gone, it makes people feel very alone. And I think that some of your work, again, like, when you listen to the podcast and all the stuff that you've done, I feel like that is sort of what we all need to kind of get back to, or that's the piece of religion that if we could just grab it and hold on to it, would carry people through these tough moments, because you build that sense of community.
Whatever
and then
looks like for you.
Whatever that looks like for you. But like, like you said, that being open to feeling like in the depths, you're going to have some feelings of love and care, whether that comes from family members or just internally, would be like the goal that I would want for everybody, at least.
Yeah, it doesn't matter if your God is Ted Danson or someone else. I don't know if you've seen The Good Place, but
I love The
such
Good
a funny
Place.
thing to think about.
That's better than Ted Nugent,
Yeah.
Well, it's not easy being a person. And
yeah, that's right.
I like I said, I'd like to keep you here for 4 hours, but I do want to let you go at some point, and I hope you'll come back and talk to us again, Kate, because
all the time
there's so many things to cover. I feel like you should be our weekly. Send your questions to Kate Bowler, please, because it just to kind of, not to summarize, but I think I want to leave people with that whole idea of hope and action. How do you think we can help each other? You've written 7 books, and they're all very different from each other, but I think the theme throughout is that love and decency and respect and forgiveness theme that runs in all of us. Yeah, we're going to get sick, and yeah, things are going to happen to our friends, and our parents die, and some terrible things are going to happen. And if you think they're not, I think that's when you're the most ill-equipped. I'm not saying to expect the worst, but to not live in this world of, I'm a good person, nothing's going to happen to me, is not helping anybody. But how do we help each other? So, and you've got 8 seconds. No, I'm just kidding. People do that to me all the time. In 7 seconds. No, seriously.
That's
how do we talk to each other? How do we help each other? And that's a huge question, but for people that really don't understand why they don't have friendships and why they don't have support.
Yes. And that, because I think that framework of deserve, of like good or bad, reward or punishment has been really, it's been too heavy for all of us. And like, I think just stripping it down, what we really desperately need is the vulnerability that love creates. Like, the more love we have, the more we realize like that we're desperately both needy and wanty, and both are good. And it's a little embarrassing because you'll look and feel a little ridiculous, but you'll do exactly what you did, Jann, where you're like, actually, this framework has broken down. And I will be asking for 10 favors. But I think the embarrassment of being of trying to be superhuman has put us in an absolutely unsustainable place. So we're just like stripping it down. We've got to get back to being people who know our own belovedness because we want to share that same feeling with other people.
Know our own belovedness. My mom used to always say, and God bless you, Kate Bowler, when you're easy on yourself, you're easier on other people. And when you're hard on yourself, you're hard on other people. And there's so many little Joanisms that she's left with me. But listen, I cannot thank you enough for spending time with us today. And I mean that in all sincerity. Please come back and share your wisdom. Kate Bowler has written 7 amazing books. Go online, go to your local bookstore, go find any one of Kate's books. You don't have to read them in order. It's not Lord of the Rings. You are not going to have to begin at the beginning because it's one of those books, any of her books you can take into the bathroom, the toilet with you and open it up. And while you're peeing, you can find some wisdom. And I know that's probably a terrible sell point for your literature. But to me, I always find the greatest solace in reading things in the bathroom. Just one page, like a one-page poo. That's what I call it.
That's like what I do. That's what I do with podcasts and showers. Kate has had a shower with me more times than I can count.
Love it. This is going on the cover of every new book as the great endorsement.
It's true.
Make me part of your bathroom. That's all I ask.
Kate Bowler's book, you'll have a ring around your butt from just sitting there longer than you need to read her books. And please use that. Put me on the front cover of your next one. She also has a terrific podcast, Everything Happens podcast. And also, if you have a moment today, if you're doing the doom scrolling, Kate has an amazing TED Talk. And as we sit here and talk today, there's over 10 million views, and it's a terrific thing to watch if you want to be uplifted, encouraged. You're going to fuck up, and the people around you are going to fuck up, but we have to learn to. I'm leaving you with the last sentence, and then we're going to say goodbye. What we have to learn to what, Kate?
Oh, be embarrassingly in love with ourselves and the world.
Kate Bowler has been our guest. You've been listening to the Jann Arden podcast. We'll see you next week, guys. Thanks so much for listening. Toodly-doo.